In the previous chapter, we witnessed Minato and Naruto switching bodies. Naruto is living in a life he knows nothing about, with responsibilities thrust upon him that he doesn't have the proper ability to carry out. Meanwhile, Minato is living in the consequences of Naruto's actions. Minato realizes that Naruto must be in his body and isn't keeping up with the past. To that end, he's seeing the world around him change immediately. With Obito having survived the Kanabi Bridge mission instead of Kakashi, Obito is now the squad leader of Team 7. Itachi is dead and the Uchiha have not been massacred, as Itachi died at Obito's hands before he could complete his mission. But where are things going now? Looking through the comments, I noticed that everyone was talking about Fu being in the chapter, wondering what it meant. I needed a plot device, yes, but I did have some plans to make a sort of greater story with this. Not certain when or even if the plot will reach fruition, but I do have some stuff planned. Indeed, my friend, there is lore, but you'll have to wait and see. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed, and with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Fu came back with a second bag of popcorn and some M&Ms. He hit the play button on his remote to continue the experiment. Minato was sitting down outside of the academy on the rooftop of a building as Obito tried to get to know his team better. Obito sat before them, his legs crossed. He didn't want to stand above them, no. He wanted them to feel as if they were equals. Even though he was their superior, he acknowledged their potential if they followed his instructions. Tell me about yourself. And I don't just mean the same template you give when meeting a new person. I mean, tell me who you really are. Your dreams, your aspirations, why you think the way you do. What you want out of life and why. Sasuke, go. Sasuke was thrown on the spot. Well, I want to be the head of the military police. Obito nodded. Oh, interesting. What made you decide to set that as your goal? Sasuke thought about it. Honestly, you have a lot to do with it. This surprised Obito. Me? Sasuke nodded. You were the Uchiha's defense when my brother attempted to destroy everything. I came to realize how important peacekeepers are. Those who protect Konoha from the inside are as important as those who defend it from the outside. It made me sad that my brother made this decision to throw away everyone, myself included. I loved him with everything I had and he sought to destroy me, but it made me desire to protect Konoha more, from all threats, foreign and domestic, to value justice and the lives it's designed to serve. Obito smiled softly. That's a great dream. But what about you, Sakura-chan? Surely you have a dream and a goal. Sakura looked over at Sasuke, then away with a hint of a blush. Obito smiled. Oh, trying to impress someone, I take it. She looked up. It's not a very good reason. Obito shook his head as he approached her. Love is perhaps one of the best reasons. All shinobi work through love. All the best ones anyway. But there are many types of love, and a lot of people a shinobi is required to love. Sometimes balance can be hard. Trust me, I was the same as you at one point. How did that turn out? Sakura asked. Obito smiled. It turned out pretty good for me, but there was a time when I almost had to sacrifice her for the entire village. And despite how hard that was, I would've, because the life of a shinobi isn't about oneself. It's about others. Does that make sense? Sakura nodded. He then moved to Minato. Naruto Uzumaki. I'm very interested to hear what your goals and reasoning are, so lay it on me. What do you want out of your life? Minato sat there. He had no clue why Naruto had decided to become a shinobi. Looking over at the stone face, he recognized himself. Surely Naruto knew who his parents were, right? Obito followed his gaze. The Hokage? Minato looked back. He decided to roll with it and nodded. So you want to be Hokage. That's a pretty common dream. But it's no less unique, because for as many people as there are who wish to be Hokage, there's an equal number of reasons. Why do you want to be Hokage? Naruto spoke. My father. He was Hokage. I want to be like he was. Make him proud of me, so he can look down upon me from heaven and smile. Obito smiled. Your father was an amazing man. He was my hero of a sort. He was so kind and patient with me. I was a lot of trouble for him when I was training. My rivalry with Kakashi probably drove him mad, but he would always smile. I was often invited over to his house for dinner. He was like the father I never really had. Minato at this point was starting to bubble up with tears. Obito noticed. Oh, I'm sorry, Naruto. I didn't mean to make you cry. I know your life has been tough without him. You know that I personally requested to have you on my team so I could show your father to you. I know you can't meet him now, but I'm going to tell you as many stories as you desire, in hopes that you can know him and Miss Kushina the same way that I did. Minato didn't need to learn who he had once been, he already knew who he was, but the fact that Obito loved and cherished him so much, and even took it into his hands to be a guiding light to his son, it was overwhelming. "I love you, Obito," he said, and for a moment Obito thought he heard Minato's voice inside of Naruto's. Obito almost started to cry over this and hugged him back. To this, Sasuke and Sakura were smiling. Obito, a moment later, rose to his feet. "Alright guys, time to take you to perform a rite of passage. It's something my master did for me and my team when we first came together, and his master did the same for him. This tradition is as old as Konoha itself." He led the trio out into the forest a ways away where he spoke of the bells and the bell test. Obito smiled. In many cases, the group was always told that whoever didn't get a bell at the end would be sent back to the academy, but I'm not gonna tell you that. Instead, I'm going to be transparent with you and explain the test's meaning. That being said, this is technically no longer a test because of this, but more of an exercise in teamwork. He raised the bells. These bells represent a lot. They represent the mission, but they also represent sacrifice. As you can see, there are only 2 bells instead of 3. By the end of today, those with a bell will get a special treat, and the one without will get none. He or she will be forced to watch their team enjoy something nice and get none themselves. That's the sacrifice. To sacrifice for the team, Sasuke asked. Obito smiled. For the whole village. That's the final thing these bells represent, and the most important. These bells represent the will of fire. The only way you can get them is if you work together against me. But by working together, you must realize that you won't get a prize. You'll have to decide who to sacrifice. Because I know from experience that sometimes, on mission, not everyone comes home. And as a shinobi, you have to be ready to accept that. Accept that you might not come home, or that someone you love won't be. The air grew thick. Despite this, Minato was so proud of Obito. He had truly learned the core meaning of this test, and now he was putting it to good use, properly explaining it to his team. "Now," Obito said, "come at me." The group rushed at him. Fu smiled. "What a nice concept! So sweet, so cheesy! I can make everyone come home if I wanted. He who controls time also controls space, and he who controls time and space controls all of fate. He turned over and looked at Naruto and Minato's body. Maybe that's just what we need here. Certainly would make things more exciting. Naruto would return to Konoha with Obito and Rin. They were debriefed by Hiruzen each, but the one who had to give the longest account was Naruto, as he was active commanding officer of that mission. And then it all collapsed, and Kakashi perished. Obito had to do things that... I lost control. I couldn't control him. I was focused on protecting Rin. Hiruzen looked down. How are they taking this? Naruto shook his head. I haven't heard anyone speak a single word that wasn't objective related. Hiruzen took a second and then put his hand on Naruto's. How are you doing with this? Naruto looked up. I feel like they were counting on me, and I failed them. Hiruzen then spoke. As a Jonin and as leader of a squad, we sometimes feel responsible for everything that happens to our team. Trust me, I know what it's like. To watch your team fall apart, to lose a trusted member. You can't blame yourself. You're not God. Naruto looked up. They went out trusting I'd bring them home, and I failed them. I wasn't ready for this, and I pushed myself. Hiruzen shook his head. No, they went out knowing full well that they might not come back alive. They were prepared to pay the cost. Naruto shook his head. I won't let this happen again. Minato. Naruto stood up. No, I'm serious. I won't let this happen again. I swear it on Kakashi's grave. Not a single one of my students will ever die on the battlefield again. Naruto turned around and left the room, leaving Hiruzen alone with his thoughts. Minato returned home to Kushina, who'd be there to greet him. I heard what happened, she said as she kissed his cheek. It wasn't your fault. Naruto just shook his head and walked in. He went to the fridge. Kushina followed him from behind and watched as he pulled out a carton of milk and popped the cap to drink from it. I hate it, he said. Kushina was left questioning. However, before she could ask, he continued. I hate it when people tell other people it wasn't your fault. The blame has to go somewhere, and whether I was in total control of the situation or not, those children are my responsibility. One of them didn't come home, and that's on me. You can't say that about yourself, Minato. If you do, you'll drive yourself insane. Naruto turned around. I just realized today that I have nobody to deliver Kakashi's headband to. There's nobody to miss him. Kushina nodded. His father was a single parent. He killed himself when Kakashi was still small. I'll never forgive that, Naruto said. Regardless of what everyone else thought, Kakashi still needed him, and he threw him away. Sold his life for honor Kakashi never needed. Kakashi had his own honor. Kushina stepped forward. Minato, calm down. You're grieving. You're in anger right now, but it's a pendulum. You will swing back. She took his hand and put it on her belly. Remember that another life will soon be depending on you. I know you want to think about Kakashi, but push it from your mind. It's not disrespectful not to think about him. It's just too painful now. Think of him when you're emotionally capable. For now, think about our family, our baby and his future. Naruto grit his teeth. Our baby will grow up an orphan. His father and mother will die in an attack and not a damn person will care. They'll hate him even. He'll regret being born. That's what he'll experience. Kushina was shocked. Minato, that's your pain talking. Our baby won't grow up as an orphan. Yes, he will, Naruto shouted. He'll never know his parents and be left wondering why the world is so cruel. He'll only suffer more and more. There'll be no happiness for him because the same world that kills Kakashi will try and kill him too. Kushina took a step back. The volume of his voice startled her. You don't know that, Minato. I do know it because I'm that baby. Some freaking soul switch across space and time. I'm Naruto. Minato's gone, and I know my history. Kushina took a couple steps back. In her head, she began to think he'd lost his mind. Minato would take another swig of the milk as Kushina continued to create distance between them. He looked over at her. What, do I scare you? He shook his head and took another sip. I'm not scared of you, Minato. I'm scared for you. That's not what your feet are saying, he said. He put the milk up and made his way outside. He walked the streets of Konoha. Thinking about the future, he began to realize that he flubbed by telling her that he was their child. Only one of two things could happen now. Either she would believe him, or she wouldn't. If she believed him, he would have just altered the future and caused a massive change. Or she wouldn't believe him and he'd be labeled insane. If that was true, well, that was the end of everything. And so he would walk the streets quietly and come to rest on a bench near the park. He would look over the water of the river and sigh. How long did he sit there? An hour? Maybe more? Who knew for certain? But as he did, something caught his eye. Looking to the side, he noticed someone coming in his direction. It was Kushina. She walked up to him. Minato, can I sit? He nodded. She took a seat beside him on the bench. Her hand covered his and clasped his fingers to hers. Minato, I know you're stressed. With everything going on in the war and with the baby on the way and now the passing of Kakashi, I want to tell you that it's gonna be okay, she said. You always go beyond the call of duty in everything, and you do so with a smile. Some people forget that you're still human. I think you forget that sometimes too. And maybe what I think happened today was all of that mixed with your mind struggling against mortality caused you to snap. So you think I'm crazy? Naruto asked. Kushina shook her head. I think you're tired. I mean, unless you have some proof, then I'll just jump on board with you. But you've been acting strange for a long while. I think you're just overclocked. I think you need some time to rest. I don't think time is something I have, Kushina. Then Hiruzen will make you some. You act like the whole world is on your shoulders. It is, he said. Kushina laid her head on his shoulder. Perhaps it is. Perhaps everything you told me is right and you really are our baby somehow, from the future. I can't say for certain, but I will say this. By straining yourself, you'll fail more than you accomplish. Simply accept that things are out of your control, and if things change because you're not perfect, then that's okay. Maybe they were always meant to change. She kissed his hand. Just promise me that while you try your best, you won't take yourself so seriously. Let tomorrow worry about itself. Sufficient for the day are the evils thereof. Naruto nodded. I'll try. She helped him stand. Let's go home. I'm gonna have Hiruzen extend your leave. We're going on vacation. And that's exactly what happened. Now, as all this was going down, Rin would be captured by the mist, or so she believed. In essence, she had the three tails sealed inside of her. She would escape with the help of Obito, who at this time had become a fairly capable shinobi in his own right, nearly ready to become a Jonin. But as they were escaping, she kept trying to put herself in danger or be killed. Obito would shake her. What's wrong with you? Do you truly wish to die? She began to explain to him the situation. Using his abilities he'd developed over this time, including his recent studies of sealing techniques, he would place a second seal on her before utilizing his Kamui to reach into her chest and touch her heart, where he'd remove the seal safely himself. This preserved her life and allowed for her to remain without being a threat to Konoha. It was from this moment where Obito truly touched her heart, literally, tears of blood spilt to save her life, that she truly began to understand how much Obito meant to her. The two shared their first kiss on this battlefield, and as they returned home, Rin and Obito were hailed as heroes for bringing the Three Tails back with them, severely crippling the power of Kirigakure, who had lost their most valuable asset with no gain, having it turned against them. As the war raged on, it seemed to be slowly drawing to a close in Konoha's favor, but instead of completely finishing the war, instead Hiruzen attempted to bring peace by an armistice. Konoha gained nothing from this war, only the loss of life. This left Konoha's citizens very uneasy with the current leadership. The voices cried for a new Hokage. It was then that Minato would be chosen for Hokage, and by Minato, I mean Naruto. He was unsure about his ability to properly fulfill the role, but at the same time, Naruto had craved to be Hokage his entire life, so to be able to have that chance to do it, he couldn't help but try and take it. And so, as the face was put upon the rock, Naruto sat back at his desk. He would come to realize just how much was required of him to do, and there was a big issue. He was still just a 12-year-old in spirit, meaning he had no clue what these thousands and thousands of pieces of paper even meant, let alone what to do with them. This put Konoha into a sort of secret crisis, in which Hiruzen, though retired, returned to the office as an assistant to help Minato understand all this paper. To a point, Minato even allowed Hiruzen to make executive decisions for him until he could figure it out. Hiruzen was starting to regret his decision of not choosing Fugaku. At least with his Sharingan, Fugaku could speed read. Minato seemed barely even able to read. This caused Naruto to rethink his life goals. Should he ever return to his own body in time, he might rethink his desire to be Hokage. As the months passed though, Kushina would eventually reach the point where she was ready to give birth. They would take her to a secret location where only they knew, or so they believed. Do you think we here at the Amagi would ever let Kushina give birth without some form of issue? No way! And as she's laying there on the table getting ready to give birth, Naruto cannot bring himself to look at anything. They tell him that he needs to keep the seal closed, but because he's not in any condition to do that, they have to rely on a specialist instead. He doesn't really like the idea of being present and viewing his own birth at the time of it occurring. Kushina screams as she pushes with all of her might. Naruto simply offers her his hand. Eventually, the tiny cries of brand new life echo out. Despite his desire not to pay attention, he can't help but look back immediately. He stands and walks over to see the baby, but as he catches only a glimpse, they walk right past him to Kushina, handing it to her. Naruto looks down at it and sees how closely Kushina is hugging the child, and he nearly breaks down to tears. Well, not nearly, he does. He breaks down into tears. For so long, he had never felt any form of true affection. No love. He'd always been hated. And even though he was now in another body, he still hadn't felt it. After all, the person everyone loved was Minato, not the Naruto inside of him. But right now, he was looking at his mother hugging him, loving him, crying over the beauty of birth. She was happy he was alive, and despite the fact that the future likely had changed quite a bit, Naruto was sure that if anything in his past remained the same, it had to have been this. As Naruto walked over and knelt down to get a closer look, he could only imagine how Minato had reacted to this situation as well. Maybe it wasn't so bad that he switched bodies. Maybe he'd been forced to switch bodies simply to see this moment here and now. As Fu watched this, he wiped a tear from his eye and blew his nose into a handkerchief. Shows like this always make me cry. He then grabbed the remote control and began fast-forwarding it. We need action, now! As the heartfelt moment was still ensuing, suddenly it felt like everything had changed. In but a moment, a new person appeared. A man in a mask, and in his hands was Naruto. Kushina reached out to her baby, begging for it back, but the man in the mask refused. He demanded instead Kushina. From behind his mask, a crimson Sharingan loomed, floating in the darkness. Naruto, seeing himself in danger, knew that if at this moment this person killed that baby, that he too might die, as they were one and the same. When the man in the mask threw the baby into the air, Naruto's muscle memory caused him to move so quickly that he wasn't sure he could even do the things he was doing. Looking back, he saw that Kushina was gone. Looking his miniature self over for any wounds, he was terrified to see explosive tags. Freaking out, he ripped the blanket off and suddenly, on instinct, utilized the flying Raijin Jutsu to get back to their secret home. He placed his little self in the bed and covered his little body to keep him warm. Naruto stood there and thought about what he had just done. How horrible. He had chosen himself over his mother. He had to rescue her. He began to wonder, though, if he could use his flying Raijin Jutsu again. He tried to remember the sensation and locate Kushina. Finding her, he would then teleport to her, only to find that she was weak and alone. He cut her free. Kushina, are you okay? She looked up. Minato. The Nine Tails. She pointed to the village. Naruto was in total awe of this monster. His entire body shook as he looked at it. He then looked back at Kushina and used the flying Raijin to teleport her back to their house. He laid her down and looked at them both, himself and his mother. He realized that this was the day they would both die, and that outside was the beast that would kill him. But if he did nothing, the village would be destroyed. He couldn't let that happen. Even if he wasn't really Minato, he was the Hokage. He needed to save as many people as possible. Standing, he walked over and put on the Haori of the 4th Hokage. "Minato, where are you going?" Naruto looked back. "To fulfill my destiny." Stepping outside, he was met with someone he didn't know. A masked man stood there, a tiger-striped mask covering his face, with only a single hole on the mask's left side, exposing his left eye. He wore a dark cloak, contrasting against the long, unruly white hair behind his head. His Sharingan turned. "4th Hokage Minato Namikaze. Today is the day you die." Naruto put a kunai in his mouth as he pulled out many others. He tossed them in every direction before gripping the one he had left tightly in his right hand. "I know I will, but not to you." The man displayed a short katana. Together their weapons clashed. They clanged off of each other as their wielders were pushed back. The two began to circle each other. The masked man would make distance before throwing his blade. The blade whizzed past Naruto and embedded itself in the tree behind him. While Naruto was distracted, the man lowered his stance, gripped his hand, and let electricity flow through. He rushed forward with a Chidori in an attempt to strike Naruto, but Naruto dodged it with flying Raijin before rushing up behind the man and stabbing him in the back. The man gripped the tree before seemingly fading into it. He would appear from a limb, his body bleeding. "This isn't over," he said as he faded away. Naruto watched this and then made his way to the village. There he witnessed the Nine Tails facing off against the Three Tails, the latter under the control of Rin Nohara. While the beast was distracted, Naruto raced to it and gripped it before teleporting himself and the beast to their house. It was in this moment that Naruto realized why he was so hated. The nine-tailed fox had destroyed the village, and chances were it was sealed into him. That's why he was treated like a threat, and it meant that he would have to give his life to save the village. As he prepared though, Kushina stepped out. Naruto had a moment to speak with her. She looked at him and the fox as Naruto prepared the sealing ritual. He put the baby on the cushion, well out of the Nine Tails' line of sight. "Are you planning to seal it into our baby?" she asked. Naruto looked back at her. "Yes." Kushina thought about it as she sat down on her knees. "The only technique you know, though, is the Reaper Death Seal." Truth be known, in Naruto's studies, he had come across it. He'd been trying to get in touch with his past abilities, so he had Kushina reteach it, and it indeed was what he was planning to use. She then spoke. "You are Naruto, aren't you?" Naruto stopped. He then looked back. Kushina spoke. "You said that our baby would grow up without parents, as a hated orphan. This night. This is why, isn't it?" Naruto turned to her and nodded. "Yes, it is. I surmised that the Nine Tails was put into me as a baby, which is why I was hated. And it's likely because my father used the Reaper Death Seal. And without the Nine Tails, you died, leaving me orphaned." Kushina hugged him. "Naruto, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You were telling the truth, and I completely disbelieved you." She looked at him. "This is why you've been struggling under Minato's work. You're not Minato." She thought back on everything. "Naruto, how old are you right now?" Naruto looked back at himself and then up to the moon. "Today is my 13th birthday." Kushina nearly fell to tears. "You've been through so much." She kissed his cheek. "I'm sorry we weren't there for you, Naruto, but I want to change that. Let me seal the Nine Tails into myself. I'll take it with me to the grave." Naruto looked at her. "I don't know that you can. The Nine Tails is important to Konoha." Kushina nodded. "But it will regenerate, and until it does, we have Rin. Please, Naruto. Minato and I failed you. Konoha failed you as well. We pushed something on you and likely expected Konoha to revere you, but instead, they abused you. I won't make you go through that again, nor will I allow you to die here. Let me do this as a last gift from the first person ever to know how much you're worth." Naruto was speechless. Tears formed in his eyes. Kushina kissed his cheek again. "I love you, Naruto." She pulled back. She stood and turned around. Walking out into the open, she suddenly called out to the beast. The Nine Tails turned around and looked at her. It stabbed her through with its nail out of pure spite for what she had done to it. Holding its claw, though, Kushina smiled. It had just sealed its own fate. She then proceeded to seal it into herself once again before falling to the ground. Naruto ran over. He held her up as she bled out. "Mom!" Kushina looked at him. "Naruto, take good care of yourself. Raise yourself the way you wish you had been and make good memories. Know that wherever you are, whenever you are, no matter what body you're in, I will always love you, forever." She then passed away. In that very moment, Naruto's emotions burst out in a scream. It was as if his very scream were destroying the fabric of reality. Something was happening, something very big. Fu sat forward in his chair, spitting his root beer out. Alarms were blaring. Crap! That was a nexus! That was a pillar of time! Without it, the whole damn timeline's going down! He got up and ran to his instrument, beginning to turn the dials. I need to quickly bleed it! Fu knew that too much was changing all at once, and since the future was reacting in real time to what was happening, it was starting to have complications. The universe was telling two stories, one part from the start and another part from the end. The middle had not yet been divulged, and now neither set of stories were making sense. They had hit a paradox, and because of that, logic, mathematics, and the very dimension of time was collapsing. And because time was falling apart, so was space. This perfect eternity was unraveling like a rope that had frayed too much. He stepped out of his office into the very fabric of the timelines of this world. He saw it coming apart. He pulled out his time cutter and suddenly fired an energy beam at the timeline. The timeline was condensed into a scroll containing the entire history of their world. He took it inside the base and looked it over. Crap! I gotta do some quick rewrites! He began to assume that the unforeseen variable of the connection between Naruto and Minato in a 4D space was the issue. They were carrying their own timeline within themselves through memories, and that was causing logical fallacies and inconsistencies. So he began rewriting things. I can fix this! The experiment isn't over yet! It's not over yet! Finishing the scroll, he tossed it back outside and blasted it with his time cutter, returning it to the timeline it once was. Since the story was too vague, he needed to write in a history for the two now so that the timeline could overcome this paradox. Feeling he'd succeeded, he sat back down in his chair and watched with intent. Minato, in the body of Naruto, was walking home from his sparring session with Obito and the others. He had been denied his treat, as this originally was the lesson he taught to Obito. It was his responsibility. As he walked, though, he was suddenly overcome with a deep, searing pain. He fell to his knees and gripped his head. Obito looked to him. Naruto, are you okay? Minato shook his head. It hurts so bad. It felt like he was losing himself. He felt like his soul was being ripped apart and replaced with something else. His memories, everything he had done was being destroyed. It's like the universe itself were falling apart. Nothing made sense, and he felt as though he was being thrown into an abyss of insanity. And as he cried out in pain, he raised his eyes up. Suddenly, he was in the Hokage's office. The pain was gone. How had he gotten there? Suddenly, memories he knew he had never experienced for himself began to appear as he stood up. Obito looked at him. Minato, are you all right? Minato nodded, and suddenly he realized it. Wait, what did you call me? Minato? Minato stood and looked into a mirror. He was still in Naruto's body, but now apparently his name was recognized as Minato. Looking back through his false memories, he came to realize that he had always been known as such, but that meant that he looked over and saw himself sitting behind a desk. At the front of that desk was a nameplate that said Yondaime Hokage, Naruto Namikaze. Naruto? Minato asked. Naruto looked at his hands and then around. How did I get here? I have the same question, Minato said. Naruto looked at Obito, Sasuke, and Sakura and then spoke. I think me and Minato are gonna need a moment to speak. Sitting in his chair, Fu let out a sigh. Wowzers, that was almost really bad. Now I can see why Supreme Kai of Time hates it when I mess with stuff. All this authoring and the implementing of canon, making things non-canon, it's super hard. Continuity can be hard to keep, but I guess this is the issue you get with linear time travel. Timelines are the universe's way of saying frick you to paradoxes. Creating a timeline that doesn't do that is just asking for universal collapse. This isn't exactly what I had in mind, but to be honest, this might be an even cooler outcome. Now I know what happens to broken continuities inside of a linear timeline. That's gonna be useful information in the future. Normally, science is done without interference. An experiment whose outcome is interfered with is unreliable, but to be honest, I'm getting attached to these little guys. I want to see what kind of story they can tell together now. Fu proceeded to open a bag of gummy Namekians and continued to watch the story unfurl. Where would it go from here? And that's where I plan to end it for today. Time travel without timelines is always a super hard thing to explain, but I assume that logically, if the universe were forced to accept paradoxes without being able to branch out, then it would simply cease to exist. I mean, I'm no physicist, but I just thought it would be a cool concept to include. Also, let me know if you guys really do want to see Foos messing with timelines start connecting some Naruto and Dragon Ball what-if scenarios. Maybe put Naruto in certain key situations in Dragon Ball and vice versa. See what would happen if Goku could only use chakra instead of ki. I got all sorts of ideas, plus an almost Avengers-style story in which Goku and Naruto need to team up together. I have so many ideas I can't contain myself. Let me know if you want to see more like that. But anyway, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, consider liking it. It helps with our algorithm. And if you're unsubscribed, consider subscribing as well to help support the channel. Don't forget to ring the bell to receive notifications for when new content like this drops, and also be sure to check out these other great videos from our channel. Until next time, peace.